In today's show, we discuss, are big pharmaceutical companies, often referred to as big pharma, are they corrupt and keep patients dependent on their products?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasula, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you're keeping safe and well.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatevs.
It's a new year, new Tayo, surely.
And we're 1 year closer to the grave.
There you have it, listener. Philosophy by Tayo. Anyway, I'm not going to ask you to say hi to the audience. I'm going to do it. Hello, audience. Welcome back to the shenanigans. Right. In today's show, we discuss, are big pharma corrupt and they're keeping their patients dependent on their products? Now, obviously, this is a subject I actually wanted to discuss, but I will kick off things by asking Tayo what your initial thoughts are on this.
Yeah, I'm not really big in this area. I don't know that much about it. My overall impression is that the way the American system works, big pharma definitely is corrupt in America because they have a very powerful lobby, which they spend a lot of money, as I'll discuss during the show, and they more or less write the legislation themselves, which doesn't seem right at all. Here in the UK with the NHS, I don't think that we have quite the same, that they have quite the same ability here. They don't have the same opportunities here, in my opinion. So that in the UK, I don't believe big pharma can be that corrupt. But apart from, of course, our famous pandemic vaccination program, which seems to be throwing up all sorts of very interesting questions, which a lot of people are saying is definitely going to end up in court with criminal cases. But that's a very niche area. And some of it has got nothing to do with big pharma. I'm thinking about gloves and face masks and things. I don't really associate that with big pharma. I just associate that with factories that produce these things.
Yeah.
So we'll see. My overall answer is yes, it's corrupt in America. No, it isn't in most other places.
Okay. There is an argument to be had about why people believe that they're corrupt because of some reported practices that the big pharmaceutical companies have got up to, and they are underhand, I suppose, or viewed as underhand. But I'm not 100% convinced that that is the case. But the reason why, okay, if big pharma, because you've raised the big point there where you say they lobby the US government, and so the government then they sway decisions their way. Well, in America, the whole system of lobbying by big corporations is allowed, but big pharma actually doesn't even have the resources close to someone like the gun lobby in America, which is by far the biggest lobbyist, and they get their way all the time. So big pharma do lobby, as do other industries in America. So they by no means are the ones that, you know, have the ear of government. They are one of many that have their own agendas to lobby government. Now, part of the lobbying process that they have in America, in particular for the big pharmaceutical companies, is to do with the patent laws. Now, the argument is had where big pharma is corrupt because they create drugs that don't necessarily cure the patients who these drugs are intended for, and instead they create side effects which in turn mean that the drug company can then sell more products to the patient in order to deal with the side effects. So it's a never-ending cycle as far as the pharmaceutical companies are concerned. Now, in reality, big pharma do create medicines and drugs to aid people, but it isn't as simple as that, where you create a drug and you're fixed. The body is a moving object. It's repairing itself, it's changing itself all the time. And drugs and medicines are temporary. Very rare do you have a drug which is so profound, it wouldn't be licensed as a drug, mind you, that has irreversible effects. They're all transient, so that you take them and during a period of time, it has an effect on your body. But if you stop taking them, then that effect is then reduced or removed altogether. Now, obviously, there are instances in some drugs that will continue, but that is few and far between. And if drug companies were indeed bad or evil or corrupt, then how can we say that when we have medicines that are helpful, day-to-day medicines, penicillin, which was a breakthrough, that was done by the drug companies, paracetamol, aspirin. A lot of these so-called low-level drugs were initially very expensive when they first came out because the drug companies produced them, they had to recoup their investment. Now the patent has expired, the products are all cheap. So, you know, the companies that are making these big investments have to recoup those costs, and those costs are not insignificant. So yes, in America, you think, blimey, they're lobbying the government to get their way, but they're lobbying the government to try and extend patents. Because if you've spent $1 billion in trying to produce a drug, which by and large will work, although it has some side effects, you have to weigh up the risks of, okay, do I take this drug? There are these side effects, but the benefits outweigh the risks. That's an individual doctor and patient's responsibility. And then they take the drug for a period of time, hopefully alleviating the major issue that the patient had. And in so doing, they have a better quality of life. Now, if the side effects are then appearing, what normally happens is the doctor will prescribe drugs to deal with the side effects. But most often, those drugs that they provide for the side effects aren't from the company that created the original drug in the first place. So this argument where drug companies create drugs and don't care about the public, you know, even if they have side effects, and then they'll sell them new drugs, I don't think that actually is true in practice, because they're then providing other companies the means to service the customer with different drugs from another customer. Do you see what I mean? So the big pharma company that's produced the initial drug is in fact losing out. So these are some of the things that big pharma, I'm not saying their practices aren't all, you know, innocent, but they're not as corrupt as some people make out.
Okay, first of all, your very first point, I mean, you made like too many for me to deal with. You know, I can't remember everything. But your very first point is encapsulated in the phrase whataboutism. When you said the gun lobby, the NRA, National Rifle Association in America, has this powerful lobby, and they spend money. Well, whataboutism is a logical fallacy in itself. If you commit a crime and you're picked up by the police, you can't go, yeah, well, you know, what about Tayo? He did. It's like, that's got nothing to do with it. We're asking whether Big Pharma is corrupt. If other people are corrupt too, that doesn't let Big Pharma off the hook, because we're not saying is the corruption justified. We're saying, are they corrupt? And if they are writing their own legislation, so some of the figures here sort of kind of disprove your whataboutism idea that, yeah, they're not even that big. Americans, this is from the CBS News, 2nd of January, 2019. it's on their website, CBS News in America, 2nd of January 2019. Americans spent $535 billion, $535 billion on prescription drugs in 2018, in just that 1 year. $500 billion, an increase of 50% since 2010. Now, those increases, big pharma increases, were placed on the most prescribed medications, and they were from anywhere between 40% and 70% between 2011 and 2015. So when you're talking about they are trying to recoup their money for their research, first of all, you have to recoup all that money within 4 years. Secondly, what about the fact that pharmaceutical companies receive substantial US government assistance in the form of publicly funded basic research and tax breaks? What about that? So the taxpayer helps to fund the research, and then these companies turn around and hammer the same taxpayers with this rather exorbitant, hard to justify increases. Why are you increasing? I mean, the rate of inflation between 2011 and 2015 was what was it, 2-3%?
Yeah.
So where's this 40% increase coming from, and 70%?
But that's not a failing. That's not actually a failing of the pharmaceutical companies.
Well, I sort of think it is, because if they're charging that,
because let's put it this way. The government should be putting some regulation in terms of capping what sort of price increases,
which is exactly why I'm saying it's a corrupt system. That's exactly why we're saying they're corrupt, because they fund so many senators, so many Congress people, their campaigns. So these are not going to turn around. I mean, if you had this lobby we're talking about, it's not people just standing there and saying, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" It's people with money in hand, yes, and junkets and all this kind of thing. Sponsoring. Well, exactly. So that's where your corruption comes from. So how can you then turn around and say the government should be doing something about it? The whole point is, well, the government can't do anything about it because the system is corrupt. And so you've just said indeed.
Big pharma's corrupt, the government system is corrupt. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, because if I bribe someone, I'm corrupt. Because I lived in Nigeria, so I know all about bribery.
It's not you corrupt. The recipient is also corrupt.
Of course I'm corrupt, because I'm offering a bribe. Why am I offering a bribe?
Yeah, you're corrupt. I'm not disputing you're not corrupt, but I'm also disputing the fact that the receiver is also corrupt.
But that's got nothing to do with it. We're not asking our question, the question we're asking is Big Pharma corrupt? Right. If you had made the question, is the government of the US corrupt, then we can argue about it, but that's really irrelevant.
Right. Big Pharma are going to do all they can to protect, and that's the word, protect their business. It's free business. They're gonna push all the bits they possibly can to try and get their way. But it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that those lines are not too wide apart.
That's irrelevant.
Allowing.
Who cares? I don't know. Your argument is just irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant.
Right.
Is Big Pharma corrupt? You can put it another way. Does Big Pharma offer bribes? Answer: yes. Finish. Who cares? That's it. That's the answer.
So they're corrupt and they're evil and they have no purpose in society because all they're doing is.
Where did no purpose in society come from?
Well, this is what you're saying.
They are corrupt. I'm not saying I never make kind of leaps of logic like that. I conflate two different things. One thing is, are they corrupt? Are they providing a service? That's a different question. So there are two questions here, and I would never conflate the two things together. One question is, are they corrupt? Answer: yes. Second question that you've asked now, do they offer a service? Yes, they do. So, what's that got to do with are they corrupt? It's like you can say a policeman.
Now, can't we? We can end our show because we've now decided they're corrupt.
Yeah, I mean, it's not decided. It's the facts and the figures. Wow, they put all this money, they pump all this money into the American political system. And as I understand it, they actually help, their lobbyists help to write legislation. That's it.
Okay.
And they don't do that, they can't do that in the UK because that's not the way our system works.
Okay. So as far as this is concerned, we've ended the argument. We've just said big pharma's corrupt, and that's it. And that's all we're discussing, other than where the root cause of the problem actually is. If you're going to dig deeper and find how have they become this corrupt, because people by their very nature aren't great with boundaries. Okay, if there's no boundaries in place, then people will push for their benefit. Okay, if it's not breaking the law, then they will keep pushing the boundaries for their benefit. It's a human behavior. You want to do what's best for you. So if you're responsible for a big pharmaceutical company and you see that your profits can be raised by raising prices, you think, well, okay, it's a free market economy. Why can't I raise my prices? And you know what? They're doing it. Whereas if there was a curb on that by government and said, oi, yes, you can raise your prices, but in a year, you can only raise them by 5%. That's it, max. So then they now have boundaries. So they've got a bit of flexibility. They can raise them from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 in that calendar year. But they're not. There's no boundaries. So the government has inadvertently made pharma corrupt, if you want to view it that way, because they've allowed them too much flexibility in order to think about themselves, rather than the government thinking of the bigger picture and going, oi, we need to keep them in check. Otherwise, this could be too ridiculous. And that's the problem with a free market economy. Yes, you want free market, you want people to create new stuff and whatever, but when they're creating this stuff, if they're spending time and money on it, they want to think for themselves. You're not going to go in a job and purposely say, to help the company, I'll take a pay cut. No, you want what's best for you. The companies as a whole will think the same attitude, what's best for them. So if they can push the boundaries, which is what they're doing, yes, in your term, they are corrupt because they're trying to get advantages where they shouldn't be getting advantages. But then that's the system failing to allow them to be corrupt.
Well, I am not the kind of person who lets people off the hook with a sort of wave of my arm and say it's somebody else's fault. If the system is such that you can offer a bribe, doesn't mean that you have to offer a bribe. Nobody's forcing you to offer a bribe.
Absolutely, I agree.
So everyone should practice taking responsibility, and I think it should be enforced by law. There's no such thing. I think even in the court of law, when you go to the court, you say, well, I was able to because the system enabled me to. So it's not really my fault. It's really the government's fault. That's not going to fly with anyone. You know what you're doing, and you shouldn't be doing it. Raising the prices of these drugs and basically fleecing Americans just because they can doesn't mean that they should. And the fact that they are means that they are corrupt. Now you say it's in their they're just looking out for their interest. Well, I think that a healthy society that isn't going broke, trying to just enrich a few people, I think that's in everyone's interest. And if they can't see that, they're just greedy, and for the sake of a second or third yacht, this is what they're doing. And I put it to you that in any sensible system, we don't only look at the environment, we look at individuals' personal responsibilities.
Absolutely agree.
So everybody goes out rioting, and then you go out rioting too because everybody else is doing it. That's not a good excuse. When you get caught, you're for the high jump.
No, agreed.
No, so are Big Pharma corrupt? They are. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to move on
if it's allowed, it's not corruption, is it?
Well, it is corruption because it's the same sort of thing that I gave an example of this sort of thing when I was speaking about how Nigerian senators practice corruption. They pay themselves huge, mind-boggling bonuses that's all done, legally,
Yeah.
but it's still corruption.
Okay.
So we know,
we can't moan about it, can we? We can say big pharma are corrupt, but hey, so what? We're not going to do nothing about it. So
first of all, we're not Americans, and there's nothing we can do about it anyway.
There's no point discussing it.
Well, there is, because what we're saying is the system. I mean, eventually, it's like one of the most logical things that human beings do is hunt an animal to extinction. It's completely illogical, because when the animal is gone, whatever reasons you gave for hunting it, that's over too.
Yeah.
In the same way, making this system so unworkable eventually is going to cause a massive breakdown, and eventually it's going to work against big pharma in a horrible way. Maybe I can't imagine how, but I suppose even in America, you might start thinking about, no, in America, never go all the way to state-owned big pharma. But I think, people are going to have to sit down and work out something which is going to be the pendulum, as you always say. You mentioned on several occasions the way the pendulum tends to swing this way and that.
Yeah.
When the pendulum comes swinging back, it's going to go too far in the other direction, and they would have caused it themselves. And I suppose, no one foresees a radical change. That a demagogue, this demagogue I was going on about, and I don't mean Trump, by the way. A demagogue gets up and he says, these guys have been swindling us for the past X number of years, and then people start getting picked up and thrown in jail. Laws are made which clearly violate human rights and so on and so forth, and they'll just go after everybody, and the wheat and the chaff together will be equally damaged, because people will just be angry and they'll be asking for a pound of flesh, and they won't really care where it's coming from. This is the danger of this sort of thing. But when the good times are rolling and the champagne is flowing, nobody ever thinks about that. And then it turns around and bites them in the bottom.
Do you know what? I don't think this will ever be fixed.
Well, it can't go on forever, because America's broke. America is broke and Americans are broke. So
okay, how do you? Slightly shifting. When the problem gets too big, you said that the pendulum will shift. The pendulum's not even shifted enough, because at the end of the day, big pharma still produce medicines and drugs that actually help. So whether they're evil 100% is still up for debate. I do not believe that to be the case. Their practices, you're right, are not great, and some could be, in quotes, corrupt, but they still produce stuff which actually has benefit, rather than keeping people addicted. That's not the case. But you're right, they're lobbying interests, raising prices when they shouldn't be. There's certain questionable practices, and this is something that should be brought under control. But if you then parallel that with the gun lobby, I'm using that as an example purely because you said, oh, the pendulum will swing too far and then it will damage themselves. In America, there's been lots of mass shootings, etc. People have died, but still, they don't change anything substantial as far as gun laws are concerned. So do you really believe that the pharmaceutical companies will be affected in such a way that the pendulum will go, right, enough's enough? I'm not sure.
Yes, I do.
At what point will that be?
Well, who knows? Well, at the point where the dollars stop flowing, all this printed money, people can actually afford it. At the point when the gun violence gets to go back to NRA example,
yeah.
When the gun violence affects the people who currently live in gated communities, when it gets out of hand, and the big wigs, the plutocrats who run things behind the scenes, when it affects them, that's when things will get out of hand. That's when things will start getting better. So everything is fine now because the rich people in the gated communities, these things don't really affect them. Immigration doesn't affect them. Letting all these millions of people across the border into the US hasn't affected them yet. But when it does, things will change. When you're talking about big pharma, in America, apparently about 1 million individuals suffer from type 1 diabetes, where a body cannot make its own. Type 1 is when the body cannot make its own insulin.
Yeah.
Right? So, without that, people die, basically.
Indeed. And
the cost of a vial of insulin, and this is 2018, so I think it's gone up a bit even since then. In 2018 was $300 for a vial of this essential drug. And a 2012 Congressional Diabetes Caucus, found that the price of insulin had doubled since 2012. So in the 6 years from 2012 to 2018, the cost of insulin had doubled from $150 per vial to $300 per vial, which is vial, V-I-L-E. To think of life-sustaining drugs and making it harder. You're basically taxing people with diabetes. It's a form of corporate tax because they've got few options. And there's a case here of where I'm reading this from a website. Poor girl who was going to secondary school, to high school, what the Americans call high school, and she was trying to ration her insulin because the family just couldn't afford it.
Don't they have insurance that cover most of these, though?
Insurance will not. My nephew, who I keep talking about, lives in America, has told me a lot about how insurance works over there. If they think that it's going to be an ongoing thing, well, your insurance doesn't really cover it, so they just say they're not going to cover it. Because the insurance companies are the other lobby, the other people in the healthcare who cause problems by being too close to government.
You could say this with all big industry in the US. It's the way
but I'm talking about pharma.
Okay.
When I'm talking about pharma, I'm talking about this healthcare thing. And so this poor girl died at the age of 22 because just simply couldn't afford the medication. And that's what we're talking about here then. It's a corrupt system, and the big pharma is corrupt because they don't really care. If someone, the head of some big pharma company, was really concerned about things like this, if that had been his daughter, things would change. But of course, he's making all these millions, and he or she doesn't really care. And that's the problem, that it doesn't affect the people who are making the decisions. And as long as that continues to be the case, until the pitchforks and the torches come out, it's going to be. I mean, you're saying, how can this all go topsy-turvy? Well, have you heard about, what's it called now? Okay, I'm going to use a very British term, and that's the wrong term. Shoplifting raids.
Yep.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know what shoplifting is, but I don't know shoplifting raids.
Yeah, okay, it's the wrong term. That's not, the Americans don't call it shoplifting raids. But what it is that groups of people will decide that they're going to just run into a shop and just grab whatever they want to from the shelves and leave. This is happening more and more often now in America.
Okay.
There's a proper term for it.
You're saying, let me clarify. So they're going in and shoplifting.
Yeah, they just run in, grab what you can, and run out. But there's like a whole bunch of you do that. It's not a one-person deal.
And this is medicines in particular.
No, anything. Just whatever is in the shop. So and it's becoming, and there's a mayor. There's California, somewhere in California. And I don't know what city he's running, but when they catch these people, he kind of just lets them go because it doesn't mean you go to prison.
So they're permitted to do this, to break the law.
Essentially, yes.
But it's because he understands that their needs are greater than the profits of the companies that make the goods.
No, he says that's because one of his parents was jailed, and he thinks that jail is wrong.
Are we
But
changing the subject here
no,
slightly? Because now,
I'm trying to say that when society breaks down,
yeah,
that this is a breakdown in society. Because if you just gone back a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, what I've just said would have sounded like madness.
yes,
But because of all the things that have happened in the past 10 years, it doesn't sound like absolute madness anymore.
no,
Right. That's society breaking down. And when it gets to the point where people are, I think I did mention in the previous, the last time we spoke or the time before, I said when people on the left and people on the right were shooting at each other across the street in
yeah,
America, that is basically heading towards civil war.
yeah. We spoke about this.
We spoke about that, right?
Mm.
So this is society breaking down at this. It's in such slow motion. It's your famous. No, well, it's not famous. You often quote the example of the frog with that
In the
and
water.
the frog in the water. That's what's happening. I see it as being it's heading towards the boiling point, but because it's it's incremental and it's slow. People don't realize this, but I realized. I said, look, something has got to change. It's going to have to, because this sort of nonsense can't go on forever, by any means. It's lawless. People are moving out of what they call the blue states, the democratic states. But
Why?
Why? Because the law and order is breaking down. They've just had is this San Francisco? They've just had the worst murder rate since 1990, I think I read, based on the fact that they said, what was it? Defund the police.
Right.
Well, they defunded the police, and of course, the police anymore. So the criminals are entirely foreseeable, by the way. I don't understand who thought.
That would be a good way of doing it, yes. That was
So,
a silly knee-jerk.
And then in California, taxes are supposed to be through the roof. People feel unsafe.
Taxes through the roof?
Taxation has gone through the roof because they're funding social programs.
Do you know what? I always take that with a pinch of salt when you hear those sorts of comments. Taxation has gone through the roof. I'd love to see the figures as to how through the roof these figures are, because in America, their taxation levels are far lower than most other developed countries.
They can move to Florida where there's no income tax. So the people moving right now are basically Republicans moving because it's a red state. Florida is a red state. But what happens when Democrats cotton on to that and start moving and following the Republicans? Where do they then have to go? I'm not moving away too far away from the corruption thing. What I'm trying to say is people will move and try to accommodate change as best as they can until they're cornered like rats.
Yeah.
And then there's nowhere else to go. And that is the point at which all hell breaks loose. Because there's nothing else they can do. I mean, they've done everything. So now they have to turn and fight. Now, a lot of people cross over from America into Canada to go and, for medical procedures and things. But I don't think I don't know what stops them from going into Canada to buy drugs. Because I was asking my nephew that. Obviously, there's the cost of the trip, but it can't be that expensive. I mean, we can fly all over Europe for $40 or some 40 pounds, can't we? On certain airlines.
Yeah.
So I'd have thought you could do the same between America and Canada. But I suppose upon your return, they're probably going to hit you with duty.
Really?
Well, I'd have thought so.
I thought that they had trade agreements where they've got the trade agreement with Canada.
Why are people just going to Canada and just I mean, instead of dying at this age of 22, this poor Antoinette, there's an R in there, believe it or not, Antoinette, not Antoinette. Why instead of dying at the age of 22, why not get your drugs from Canada?
Well, you have to see what the price difference is and how often they can do that. Maybe there's laws when you go
preventing people from, because otherwise that would be competition, which is what free market's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that competition would keep the prices down. So
Absolutely.
if there really was free market competition, then there wouldn't be an issue.
The patent is the problem, because when pharmaceutical companies want to protect their initial investment, so if they spend $1 billion on a new drug, the full research, the testing, and all the rest of it takes that amount of money. So it's a big investment. And also, part way along that investment, there are many examples where drugs have been developed at quite an expense, several, a few hundred million, but then when they get to the testing stage, it fails. So that investment of a few hundred million that they took a punt on is now gone. They've lost it. So they have to recoup this somehow. And some tactics, which you've already alluded to, is to raise products prices on existing lines to make up the shortfall that they've lost on all these other projects that have failed at the testing stage. And so that's part of their justification. Although I'm with you, they shouldn't be raising the prices to silly amounts, which is clearly what's happening and affecting the people at the sharp end of the wedge, the hard end of the wedge, where there's more of them, but affected by the drugs that they need to have a quality of life. So you're right. It's pharma, big pharma are trying to look after themselves. They're not at the end of the spectrum where they're completely evil. Clearly they're not, because they are still producing drugs which are a benefit to the society. But their practices in order to keep their income and profits are questionable. And that's because they want to make sure that they don't have competition to the very last minute. So they make sure that when they have their patent, which is 20-year patent, they can maximize it as much as possible. Now, they do lobby government for extensions. And that's because if they change the formula significantly enough in a particular product range, they are allowed a further 5 years. And this is part of the lobbying process. Is, oh, we've changed our products. Look, we've altered it in this way. We've had to do more testing. Although the testing is very small and costs are very small when they do this, they then try and increase their patent by an extra short period of time, an extra 5 years.
Okay, two things. First of all, there's no patent on insulin. Insulin is produced by everybody.
No, exactly. Now that patent is gone. Other companies can make.
So insulin. I'm giving a specific example of insulin and $300, and I just looked into it here online, and Canadians pay $35 per vial, $35, a tenth.
Yeah, a tenth.
Right. Now the problem is, at least for insulin, you can't just go into Canada and buy insulin because it's not a drug that can be sold across the counter.
Right.
So that's the problem.
Right.
You need to be part of the Canadian healthcare system to get a hold of the insulin for $35.
See, that's what I don't understand, right? Now, this is where the government need to step in, because once the patent has gone, which is the case with insulin, it should be freely available to be made by different companies. And then, as you said, market forces, you keep the price low because they're competing with one another. But this sounds like there's, I don't know, who's making the insulin? Are they artificially created barriers of entry for some of the smaller pharmaceutical companies to already produce products which are no longer under patent? And somehow the bigger companies are having an effect.
I'm pretty sure there'd be sharp practices that would make it nearly impossible for you to get in America especially. I'm pretty sure there'd be that sort of thing, because what you do is you're undercutting the market, and you could end up with, I'm speculating, but you could end up with union problems. You could end up with property problems. If you floated your company on the stock exchange in order to raise money, Big Pharma would just buy it and check you out. So you really need to be an angel investor. And I don't know, I don't know what's stopping people from doing that, but obviously something is.
Indeed.
And it's like that, isn't it?
Well, I know.
Or the outlets, because you have to have prescriptions from the doctor for this. And they could just say to any doctor, if you're not prescribing our stuff, you can't prescribe the other stuff either. I can imagine
there are
that.
underhand practices, yes.
I can imagine that happening. So
it's almost mafia-like, isn't it?
You said that Big Pharma is not evil. You're just living in cloud cuckoo land.
No, I didn't say they weren't evil.
I thought you. No, I think you got you on record here. Maybe you didn't mean to say, but
their practices. Some of their practices are not great, and we're talking at the top end. The majority of people that work in Big Pharma, they're just like you and me. They just want to make a difference. They want to produce products that are beneficial to society. It's just the people where you get this thing with corporate greed, and that's across every industry, where you get certain individuals at the top that want to maximize their profits, want to maximize their return for the company because they get more in their pocket, which you've already alluded to. And they're the ones, the upper to middle layer, that want to stand out at their company. And so they encourage processes to push the boundaries. And this happens in all industry. It happens in all industry. How we resolve it, I don't know. So singling out Big Pharma as being totally corrupt, as our topic is today.
It's not singling them out. It's not comparing Big Pharma to anyone. It's just a question: is Big Pharma corrupt?
Well, to answer
not
the
comparing,
question,
you know,
if
you didn't
want to put it that simple form, then yeah, you're right, they are.
Yeah, well,
but then you can then
our topic is a simple this and then you and then thing. It really gets my goat, man, because it's just not part of the deal. And then you want to conflate things. It's like, why are you conflating things? You know, based on what logic? Where's conflation coming from?
Because you have to see the big picture. You don't just look at something.
You don't say the big.
detail.
You don't know. I can't talk about sharks dangerous, and then you're suddenly telling me about cobras in the African desert, and you're saying you're trying to see the big picture. That's not the big picture. It's got to be contextual. And bringing in other people who've got nothing to do with Big Pharma is not contextual. Yes, we know it's the system, and then trying to offload and offset and outsource the responsibility of Big Pharma because everybody else is doing it and the gun lobby. That's just not contextual. It's got nothing to do with it. No, that's because of the way we framed the question. The question, as I'm looking at our title to this episode.
Pharma corrupt and keep patients dependent on their products.
That's it. So that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about anybody else.
Do you think they keep patients dependent on their products?
No, they have to. Otherwise, I don't know about keep. I mean, like design. Do they design products which are addictive? Yeah, that's a big ask for me. I don't think they do. I know that they locked into one. That's an American expression. They locked into one, which British people would say, properly speaking English, which they got lucky and they found opiates. That opiates are highly addictive. Yeah. And now, of course, America has got this incredible problem with opiates.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're designed. I mean, we already know that opiates are addictive. So they didn't design opiates to be addictive. They
are.
They just are. And I don't know about what else could be addictive out there.
You can be hooked, the term they use, on prescription drugs. That's the term that's often used.
Something, maybe due to lack of that happening to me, it could be just personal inexperience. I just find that some people have got an addictive personality.
Because there's a huge amount of people have some sort of addiction. It's
yeah, I've got an addiction. I'm addicted to food, and I'm not saying that lightly. I mean, really, you put chocolate near me, your hand should not be anywhere near it, because you could run into difficulty. So what I do is, we don't have chocolate in the house. We just have to. That's the only way I can control the blooming thing. Now, so I understand addiction.
Yeah.
But the idea that some people say they're addicted to Coke, they're addicted to this, not cocaine. I mean,
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola, the drink. Yeah. And then they're addicted to prescription. It's like, I don't get it. It's like it seems that everything, they can be addicted to everything and anything.
We do.
And sometimes I think it's just in their heads.
It is always in the head.
Right.
because how an addiction is formed as well is to do with there's a trigger, then there's an action, and then there's a reward. And the trigger could be that you've got a pain. So the action is you take a drug, and then the reward is pain relief. And you think, oh, okay. So that's a habit, and a repeated habit over and over can become an addiction. But there's normally a trigger. You have to instigate that trigger. So the trigger is created from the pain, and you think, oh no, the pain's coming back. So automatically the brain says, last time we had this pain, we did something and we felt better. And so the brain wants to encourage that action. So the action is the taking of the drug, which then gives you the reward, which is the slight pain relief. And then this is repeated and it becomes a part of you. And so you get this addiction. And the same happens across a whole different things, not just drugs, but that's how habits are formed. And then to the stronger degree, addictions, because it's a repeated pattern where there's a trigger, action, reward that's repeated over and over. So in your case, digressing slightly from the topic, but in your case with the chocolate addiction, you maybe had I don't know, a trigger because you were a little bit hungry of other reasons, and you thought, oh, chocolate, I'll have that. And the chocolate is the action, but the reward is the dopamine hit in your brain. And you now feel great. Oh, that was lovely. And your body enjoyed that. So it remembered it. So a certain trigger comes along, you feel a little bit hungry, you go, chocolate, I remember, it made me feel great. And then you repeated that action. And because you repeated it enough, it now becomes a habit. And then you repeated it so many times, it's now become an addiction. And they're tough to break.
You're right. That was a digression, a major digression.
Yeah, sorry.
Goodness.
Because we were talking dependent. You know, some people get dependent on them. And it's also because of that reason, because it brings them the relief they need. But remember, it's only temporary, because a lot of these drugs are transient.
Okay. And the second thing is, okay, so why is it that it's Americans who seem to be, just like the UFO thing, when they keep getting proctored, which is not a proper verb, but I find it hilarious. Why is it that it's Americans who keep getting probed anally by UFOs? But I can't even think of a single case outside of the US. Is there a single case outside of the US? Has anyone been anally probed? Why is it Americans? And then why is it Americans who seem to be addicted to everything? You know,
I think it's only because the media, most of it comes from over there.
All right. What about addiction then?
Addiction, we have that same problem here.
Well, how? Okay, so is this the media thing? Because I don't remember hearing about it here.
Yeah.
And besides, our prescription, do we have doctors handing stuff? Doctors are incentivized in America to hand these things out, aren't they?
They are. Absolutely,
they're heavily incentivized.
Again, they're incentivized by the reps, because the pharmaceutical companies have reps who they obviously have to handsomely pay, and the reps go see the doctors, and the doctors are, how can I put it? They are seduced by the reps with little benefits.
They know what they're doing. If people are interested in this, in the subject, there's a film, and what is great about the film is that it's a romance, and the drug rep thing is incidental, but it shows you what's going on. That's what I like about it. That it's not a political film. They're not trying to make a point, but you're horrified nevertheless, which the filmmakers seem to be unaware of. It's so they're so used to it themselves.
Yeah,
I think that they don't notice. They don't know how horrible it is to somebody who's not in that system.
Yeah.
And it's called Love and Other Drugs. It's a 2010 film.
Love Another Drug.
And Other Drugs.
Love and Other Drugs. Okay.
Yeah, 2010. It's Anne Hathaway and what's the chap's name? Anne Hathaway and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Oh yeah. Oh, I think I have seen the
trailer. Yeah. So what is interesting is he's just trying to make make money,
Yeah.
doing this thing. And
Who's
then,
the doctor and who's the rep in this?
he's the rep. She's
Right.
not. She's just a love interest. It's like I said, it's a romance,
Oh, I see. She's
and
not
she
like,
doesn't really have anything. She's not in the medical profession or anything.
oh,
She's just his love interest.
yeah.
But how he tries to go about getting into doctors, because it's not easy, because everybody else is there already.
Yeah.
and that's incidental. That's why I like this for the audience members to go and watch it, because it's not trying to score any points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does highlight the fact that how
To
they can
me,
get
I was
into...
sitting there thinking, this is terrible.
Right.
It was awful.
Is that viewing it from a UK perspective? Obviously,
Yes.
So
It
if you can, okay, don't spoil the film, but the bit that you're referring to, which is topical with our subject, what was it that particularly you thought, gosh, what's happening here? How did the reps get in, or the influence? Could you elaborate?
No, one thing he did, which it's completely immoral, was that he was taking other reps' drugs off the shelves and throwing them into a dumpster and leaving his behind.
Now, was this just for the film, or is this actually something that could happen in reality? I mean, you've got to remember the film could be fantasy here.
Okay, if you want to, all right. Then he was whining and dining the secretaries to the doctors so that he could get to the doctors.
Right, which is actually part of a rep's repertoire. That's what reps do.
He was doing more than whining and dining, if you catch my drift.
Ah, I see. Okay, he's winning favors other ways.
Yes.
Oh, okay. But that's what happens to get to the doctors. Yeah, and also once the reps are in,
exactly.
Schmoozing the doctors.
Yes, there were schmoozing, and then how doctors had their favorite reps and what they were giving. Trips to Hawaii in one case. All expenses paid and stuff like this. But there were supposedly laws. And then how they said, oh, that's what you do, is you do it like this.
To get around the law.
It was so well known. You can't just give me a ticket. No. You have to do it like this.
You see, thankfully, over in Europe, the bribery laws are really tough. So anything above £50 in value cannot be given. If you do, you have to record it on a special register so that anything can be looked back and got, hang on, he gave something there which was over £50, and he has to be justified, and it can't be seen as winning favors in any way. It has to be, so for instance, let's say the doctor chose to give a particular drug to a group of patients because they needed it. So it was higher than normal. And this happened with no influence from a rep whatsoever. Then the rep, to reward the doctor, gave them a bunch of flowers or a box of chocolates to say, thank you for using our product. Now that would be allowed because A, they didn't pre-influence the decision-making of the doctor. Secondly, the reward was small, but it can't be seen and evidenced where a rep gives a handout to a doctor to, in quotes, encourage them to use their products before they've been used. Now, obviously, a rep can go in and just talk to a doctor, say, look, why don't you use our products? It does X, Y, and Z. Now, obviously, it's a sales exercise. That's what a rep's for. If you've got a competing company that sell a similar product, it's up to the doctor to decide which rep has made the better case for a similar product. However, if there's only one
you're
product
living in cloud
the
cuckoo land. I have to interrupt you because
go on.
You're living in cloud cuckoo land. The way he got around it, one of the ways he got around the Hawaii thing in the movie, was to set up a conference where he invited the doctor to come along and give a speech.
Right.
But it was all nonsense. It was just come along, spend half an hour talking, and there's your X thousand, and
that's
we're paying.
Perfectly legit, by the way.
Yeah, but the point is, it's nonsense. It was a setup. It's just
Yeah.
a way of the guy having a 4-day holiday in Hawaii, all expenses paid, with a little bit of money on top.
Yeah.
See? So there are ways, the reason I interrupted is that there are ways around these things.
Yeah, they are. They are.
Right.
Although thankfully that doesn't happen as much in Europe, I'll be honest. But
Yeah,
in
because the
America,
NHS, you see, NHS, it's if it's going to happen at all, and I read about it, say, is the NHS corrupt? I did ask the question online, and basically, I think the answer is not really. But if there is corruption, there's been known to be corruption, some degree of corruption, is where these big contracts are given out in the NHS.
yeah.
And obviously, people go along and try to influence the contract, and they offer bribes
Well,
and
it's the
things.
same thing, but a higher level.
Yes, no, but the point is, when the decision is made by the standing committee on what drugs are going to be prescribed by NHS doctors, it's a large committee, and they do it, for the benefit of the patient. What's it called? Cost benefit analysis.
Cost benefit analysis. Yeah.
Cost benefit analysis, and for the medical benefit of the patient. So because it's done at that level and by that number of individuals, the system is more robust and protects itself against undue influence. And maybe it's not 100%. I can't tell. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the looking at it online, the analysis I did is that nobody's really complaining. Nobody's pointing fingers. There are no whistleblowers. By and large, it seems to be free of corruption. So it's doable.
Yeah.
It's definitely doable. It's just that the American system doesn't like that sort of thing.
No.
There we go.
But then again, the NHS National Health System in the UK is a big body. They deal at high level, and you're right. There's many committees that have to overview the decision making when a major purchase has to be done or a major investment. So it's not just up to one individual. It's a group of people, and they could be different each time. So the big pharmaceutical or whoever, it doesn't have to be pharmaceutical, but in the health industry that wants to negotiate a big deal, that takes several months, if not years, a lot of to-in and fro-in, a lot of analysis behind the scenes. So once those deals are signed, there's been a lot of due diligence done in the background to check it out. But when we're talking at the lower level, prescription drugs by doctors, then, is it such a bigger problem when you get a rep in schmoozing a doctor so that he can get a bigger bonus pay and the doctor's handing out his medicine? See, at that level, is it corruption? Is it just schmoozing? Is it just sales reps? It's not really big level
if the
production.
doctor is handing out a prescription because of something the rep has said, rather than because it's the best medication for his patients, then yes, it's corruption. Because the only thing in the doctor's mind should be, is this the best pill or medicine for my patients?
But that's not always the case, because you may have different medication that does similar thing, but it's so much cheaper. I mean, look at the.
Sorry, what does that got to do with what I said now?
No, but you're saying the best for the patient. Sometimes the best for the patient may be out of the patient's and the doctor's hands purely based on cost.
So the best affordable for the patient.
Okay. That again, but the fact that you put affordable in that title means it's not necessarily the best. It's the best for that price point. The best one is.
But don't American doctors prescribe against the insurance anyway?
Yeah, I know.
So really, affordability, how does that come into it?
It comes into it because it's affordability of the insurance and what's covered under it. Okay. So the insurance will have a criteria as to what price point can certain drugs be sold up to. And if the drugs cost more than that, the doctor can't prescribe it.
Right. So if you got five drugs that are affordable, for me, the only thing the doctor should be thinking about is which of these is best for my patient.
Absolutely.
Now, if it's paracetamol and they're all paracetamol and they've all got the same amount of paracetamol in it, and there's really nothing to choose from between the drugs, and he prefers the drugs from company A because he likes the representative more than he likes the representative from company B, well, that's not corruption then.
No, it's not. Not at all. But
because it's the same. So from that point of view, then it can be not a question of corruption. But
No.
we can all see that it's still a pretty dodgy system because it lends itself to corruption.
Indeed, but there's no system out there that's foolproof. You're gonna get people.
Sorry, again, that's not relevant.
I know it's not relevant.
There's no
I'm
system
trying to
that's.
give you.
No, please don't. No, don't give me the big picture. Your big picture causes issues, man. It brings in all sorts. No, it brings issues because it's like, no, it's not relevant. There's no system. It's like, is this system we're looking at? This one. How is that? That's it.
So, okay, next time you go to the doctor, let me just give you a sideline here, which is relevant, okay? The doctor's got a drug for you, okay? Because you're complaining about your foot, argument's sake. You've got a real problem with your foot. You want to go to the doctor. Doctor goes, you know what? I'm not going to look at the rest of you. I'm just going to look at your foot. That's what you've asked me to look at. That's what I'm going to look at. So he's going to focus on your foot, just your foot. Say, right, I've got this medicine. Whoa, it's going to be absolutely fantastic for you. Okay. However, the side effects is it really bad for your heart and your blood pressure. But he's not going to ask you, have you got bad blood pressure or heart problems? He's only focusing on your foot. So he's going to prescribe you medicine, which you think is perfect for your foot, but it's going to have a knock-on effect on the rest of you.
So yeah, that's a logical fallacy.
It's not.
Yes, it is.
You've got to look at the whole picture, not just one single element.
No, because I reject your example. I reject your metaphor. It's nothing to do with what we're talking about. We're talking about a system. You're going outside the system. For this. So trying to say that in this other case, you have to go outside the system. That's like me saying, look, so I'm flying along, but I don't care about the weather because my plane is fine. It's like, that's not an example of what we're talking about. We don't have to go outside to justify whether Big Pharma is corrupt or not. We don't have to look at other systems. We just have to look at Big Pharma. There's no necessity to go outside of Big Pharma. Well, but when you're treating someone's foot and you want to prescribe some drug that is known to have an effect on the heart, I suggest that it is part and parcel of prescribing that drug to ask about the heart, about the patient's history of his heart. It's part and parcel of it. But why is he asking? Why is he asking about whether the patient likes Terminator 2?
No, that's not fun. No,
that's you. We're talking about going outside the system. It's like, that's irrelevant. You can see that there's some things that are relevant and some things that aren't.
I was talking of Big Pharma's way of working and working in the system. That's where the system is failing, because Big Pharma works in that system, so they are related. I'm not talking about NRA.
Nobody's denied that. I never said that's not the case. I did say that how many times have I said that the American system is a poor one?
It is.
Yeah, but that's not where you were going with whatever it was that I was objecting to at the time. You were stepping outside of that.
Okay. Listen, I'm mindful we're reaching the end of the show. So do you want to have any final thoughts on this subject?
No, I think I've said what I wanted to say, that I haven't changed from my opening statement. The American system is very bad, and it's Big Pharma in America is corrupt. But obviously, if the Canadians are paying $35 for a vial of insulin instead of $300, then Big Pharma in Canada and Big Pharma in the UK is not corrupt.
I think personally, the self-regulation by industry in America allows for this. And you're right, I have to agree with you. At big level, Big Pharma is corrupt with some of the practices. So really, as Big Pharma can't self-regulate, the government have to unfortunately step in and say, look, you are not carrying out your practices with the best interest of a population. You are focusing on profits above all else, which does look to be the case, but they need to step in and put some boundaries in order to rein in the way Big Pharma is operating in the States. But that aside, unfortunately, we have now reached the end of the show for another week.